welcome to a brief introduction to the DBA Prospectus template. I'm Dr. Greg Parsons, and this presentation is meant as an introduction and overview for those of you who are starting to work on your dissertation topics, or even those who have been working on a topic and need a little more support along the way. The idea is this presentation will go along with the hard copy of the Prospectus template and further explain what I'm looking for, how you should approach it, and will provide the basis of further discussions with you and me, or you and your committee, whatever stage you're at. When we first started receiving dissertation proposals or topics from students, many times they were so scattered in terms of what they were looking at or what they were considering doing that we knew that needed to be a process to go through, so that rather than simply starting writing, that a prospectus or an initial proposal, if you want to think of it that way, was presented first. And that prospectus evolved eventually into the prospectus template that I'll be talking about here. So the first question is, what's an appropriate topic? Well, the topic should define the area of research where the student plans to work. One of the problems, of course, is there's a tendency to get very broad and to choose very broad areas that really are so broad that really can't be addressed within a dissertation, which needs to be very specific and provide provable results. So one of the first things we need to do is narrow it down. And part of that narrowing comes through using existing theories in the area of concentration. So if you're in leadership or if you're in marketing, you should be pulling the theories that you're going to build your research on out of that particular area. So there has to be a clear connection between your topic and the existing theories that are out there. And also you need to show that your dissertation, when it's complete and all the results are in and the conclusions are made, that will be adding to the existing knowledge within the field, which means that you have to be contributing to something that's already there. So that'll tend to focus presentations of topics into areas that are going to be acceptable and doable. However, you can't do dissertations. Topics are not acceptable about high-profile news stories. For example, a dissertation on how ISIS is affecting oil prices. Just not going to work. There's no theory behind that at this point. So you have to stay away from things that seem like hot stories, but you're not writing a story. Okay? You're writing a dissertation. It won't work to have a topic that's specific to a single organization. A lot of students come and say, well, we have a situation where I work and I'd like to write my dissertation about that. That's not going to work either, unless that situation is somehow connected to theory, and the organization then becomes one data point of a population that's going to be explored to see whether your solution to this particular problem fits into the existing theories within the area. So you don't start out saying we got a problem in an organization and I'm going to try to come up with a solution. That won't work. The topic shouldn't be or won't be the basis of a report, whether you're talking about the report on individual. For example, I want to write a report about Gandhi and Jack Welch and Mark Zuckerberg and kind of compare their leadership. That's not going to work unless you connect it to a particular theory and then show how you're going to collect data on that. So simply writing a report on something, even if it includes sending out a questionnaire and getting some people's opinions about things, is not going to be the basis of a dissertation. It can't be on an organization. Reporting on organizations is not a dissertation. It's not on a series of events. Okay, again, you're not writing a report, which is a little bit of a change because that's what you've been writing for most of your classes. You've been writing reports on particular topics, going out, collecting information, then summarizing it and writing it up. Dissertation is different. Okay, this has to be original research, not simply writing what already has been done. So let's get into the document itself, the prospectus template. And the way that it works is, as a student, you'll be answering all the questions that are posed in bold. For example, the first one here is, what is the topic? Then I've provided some examples, depending on which area you're working in, of things that might work as general topics. Okay, so for the first one, if your area was leadership, Now, you're not going to talk about all leadership because there's thousands of theories about leadership. But, for example, suppose you've chosen to work with the idea of responsible leadership theory, as it's currently presented and thought about in the literature. And you want to figure out a way to investigate whether responsible leadership is being exhibited in the for-profit education sector and whether it's being effectively used. Okay. Well, this obviously is simply suggesting an area that you want to work with. It's not the end, and it's not the research question, but this is an example of how you've narrowed the subject of leadership down. You've connected it to a particular body of theories within leadership, and now you're talking about where you think you might be able to do your research. Requirements for the topic, as I've mentioned again and will continue to mention, it's got to be connected to existing and accepted theory, which means you have to be knowledgeable about theories in your particular area of specialization, your concentration area. You got to know what the literature is. You continually be hammered. Go back and read the literature. Find more literature about the topic, because you need to know everything there is to know about that particular basis of its theories, the stream of literature that's connected to the theories you plan to use. You need to know that there's recent publications in the area, that it's an area that people are still interested in learning about. You're going to have to explain how your work is different than what's been done before, what your contribution is, and also that the work can be generalized. So if you end up talking about one specific type of organization, there should be elements of your work that then can be generalized or utilized in a broader context, that people can see, oh, well, our type of organizations or our type of situations we encounter have some similarities to what this person is talking about in their research, and thus, it's more connected to the theory. You're expanding the theory as opposed to you're expanding the solutions to particular problems. The solutions to particular problems may come out of the improvements or to the theory, but your focus is on trying to improve the theory. And no, we probably will not accept dissertation proposals on television series. Where do the theories come from? They come out of the literature. Your primary stream of literature should always be your concentration area. If you're in leadership, you should be working with leadership literature, leadership theories. If you're in marketing, you should be working with marketing literature and marketing theories. How would you know what's been done? How would you know what the theories are unless you're working in that particular area? But of course, you're not going to know everything there is to know about a particular field. It has to be narrowed down, and that's part of the process we're going through here, is starting to focus down from a very broad definition with millions of articles written on a particular subject down to a fairly doable subsection of that universe. Okay, so we want to see an established body of literature, something that's accepted and people are working on, but not something that's too broad to have any definite conclusions about. Requirements, well, again, the stream of literature has to be connected to theory. You have to show why these particular articles and authors that you've chosen to look at, why it's related to what the theory that you're interested in improving. These articles should be coming out of, identifiable researchers, people who actually work in the field, and you should be able to see a stream of literature, the things that are connected to prior theories and where they're going. This shouldn't just be, isolated individual articles. There should be a theme that runs through these. So when you start working on your literature review, you have an idea about why you're including certain things and why you're not including other things. Although your topic may be close to application and close to practice, which is all right, it always has to be based in theory. And as an example that you're in a strong body of literature, we want to see 6 sample articles from top peer-reviewed journals in your particular area that would show us that there's substantial work done in this field. Now, the thing that's different about a dissertation as opposed to simply writing a report about something is then there's a requirement for a second stream of literature, or more, depending on what your topic turns out to be. And this is sometimes, again, difficult for students to understand. Well, I know I'm writing about some theory and leadership, but what do you mean a second body of leadership? Well, you're not simply trying to extend that theory, you're trying to show how a second stream of leadership or a second stream of literature could improve or add to the existing literature in the other fields. So you're trying to connect two together. An example might help here. So for example, if you decided you were going to work in transformational leadership, and that's too broad a topic, you should work probably in a narrower topic than that, but just for example, suppose you were going to decide to work in transformational leadership. And so you'd study the theories and you knew the background, you knew where it all came from. Now you're going to look at, for example, cognitive dimensions theory, because you know something about learning styles in education. So now you're going to try to explore what are the theories in learning that might have an influence on how a transformational leader more effectively influences his followers. How does a transformational leader use the knowledge about cognitive learners versus visual learners versus auditory learners, all the different learning styles? How does a transformational leader make use of those to reach a broader body of followers that they want to influence? Just an example. But that's what we're talking about. So you have to become knowledgeable in two streams of literature and show that you're competent in both. The requirements are pretty much the same. Has to be connected to theory, has to come out of peer-reviewed journals, has to have identifiable researchers in the field that you can point to and say, here's people that have worked in this field, here's people who, done their work under this researcher. You can see the stream of literature that flows out of this type of schools of thought. And again, we want to see 6 sample articles demonstrating your knowledge of this literature stream. Now, the biggie. Identify the gap. And the gap is generally not what people think it is. And it takes a little bit of studying and thinking and reading articles that specifically say this is the gap that we're looking at. So it's not where a particular line of research ends. It's not saying, well, there's been this much research done and now I'm going to do some more research in that area. What we're looking for is a connection between one body of research and your second body of research, and that's why we require 2 streams of literature. And for example, what if you decided, again, following up on the same example, you were going to be doing transformational leadership theory, and you chose as your secondary stream of literature information technology and advances in information technology. Okay? And your idea would be, I'm going to look at how the changes in technology, the ability to use email and instant communications, instant messaging, social media, Skype, and all these newly available technologies that allow communication to occur at a very rapid rate of speed, almost instantaneously, and how that might affect the theory of transformational leadership, which was based and developed in an era that communications was very different, and the way leaders had to think about how they would communicate their vision might be very different in the 1970s than it is today. And that might be an area that you would see a potential gap. Now, this is way too broad, wouldn't serve as a topic or a research question, but it might be the type of gap that you might be looking for if you were in the leadership area. Gap's got to come out of existing work, has to move from the general context of previous research to what you're going to be looking at and how you're going to look at it. Should be interesting and prove significant to the field of study, and that your committee and chairperson help you with that. Should be feasible, meaning that it can actually be accomplished. Should be relatively unexplored. Again, you're trying to add something new. And as I said, really is going to be bridging the gap between 2 or perhaps more bodies of literature. Generally, I recommend people try to stick with 2 because you've got to prove that you're competent in all the bodies of literature. You have to be very knowledgeable about them. And the more you add, the more knowledgeable you have to be, more of an expert you have to be in multiple bodies of literature. Finally, we get to the research question, and here's where we kind of boil everything down that we've previously done, and we're trying to get it into a kind of a 2-part question. So, for example, Does transformational leadership cause increased worker satisfaction compared to effective transformational leadership? Here we're trying to say, does this cause this? Is this related to this? And this helps to identify our independent and dependent variables. The research question, again, has to be based upon the theories, should set the context for more refined hypotheses, should describe what the dissertation is trying to explain, and it's also going to be using some sort of measure of comparison. Cross-sectional means that you're going to be looking at one point in time across different observations, different phenomenon. If it's organizations, you'll be looking at multiple organizations in the same period of time. A longitudinal study looks at changes that occur on a single organization or individual over a period of time and looks for changes there. So generally, you'll need to have some sort of comparison to make any conclusion. Simply looking at one thing, looking out today and say, well, it looks like a pretty warm day, without knowing what the average temperature is by a longitudinal study on temperatures, is not really very valid. Okay? So once you've developed the research question and start thinking about what types of hypotheses you might use, this should immediately bring to mind what are the variables that you're going to be observing and measuring. And again, many students, when they start thinking of topics, really aren't thinking in terms of what they're going to be measuring, what kind of data they're going to be collecting. They're mainly thinking, is this an interesting sort of topic? So the variables have to be fairly specific, have to be something that you're going to be able to collect data on, and something that you're going to be able to measure and have units of measurement, and also should be either independent variables or dependent variables. And again, this is important as you're even thinking about your topic, about choosing something that are going to have identifiable variables. Now, many times this will come out of the studies, out of the literature. You don't have to invent all this yourself. That you'll find that studies have been done, that data has been collected on particular types of variables, and that there's instruments out there, and many times the data from the studies that have been done already are available. So independent variable is the one that changes and affects the dependent variable. So the independent variable, sometimes in an experiment, is a controllable variable where it's manipulated to see the effect on the dependent variable. Dependent variable is the thing that we're kind of interested in seeing whether there's a relationship between the independent variable and the changes it causes in the dependent variable. Well, the requirements need to be that the variables are established, that they're well defined, that they're considered in the research, they're considered valid measurements of something, that there are instruments available that have been vetted that prove that the measurement instruments produce valid data, and that we're also looking for some sort of correlation between the independent dependent variables. Now, in the beginning, when you're starting to work on your prospectus template, all these issues won't be solidified, but they have to be things that you have to be aware. These are things that you have to be aware are going to become important as you work through the process, and if you choose a topic that you won't be able to satisfy these requirements, then the topic isn't going to work. Finally, proving the research question, and this was one I don't think people need to get too hung up on at this point, but they should be aware that at some point data needs to be collected, whether it's primary data where through surveys or observations, something that you're looking at, whether it's secondary data that's coming from existing databases or published information, or information from studies that have been already conducted. However, as you move along further in the process, we will have research methodologists that will work with you to develop the type of analysis, whether it be quantitative, qualitative, mixed methods analysis, that will be effective in analyzing the data that you do end up using for your study. We have several different approaches that are valid. We have, if human subjects are involved, even in questionnaires, there's a IRB policy that must be followed, applied for and followed. We've got to make sure that there's going to be enough data to make statistical results verifiable. And also I suggest that students consider a plan B. For example, if your particular study is going to require a certain sample size of acceptable data and you can't get it, what are you going to do? Is the topic still usable? Is there another way about going and proving or disproving your results? So that pretty much concludes all the required sections of the prospectus template. But just to review, choosing a dissertation topic is not easy. It has certain requirements, so you need to understand the theories and literature in the field that you're thinking of working in. It's an iterative process, which means that you'll come up with an idea, you'll turn it in, I'll review it, your committee will review it, we'll send it back, and it'll normally be revised. And this is not supposed to be discouraging, it simply is the way the process works. Okay. And when you turn in your prospectus template for review, you need to consider all the questions. Some of them may be more finished than others. However, don't write the topic that you don't know what the theory is. Don't write a topic that you have no idea where the data would come from. Don't choose a topic that is not doable, in other words. And that's the whole point of this perspective template and also this presentation, is to get you going on the right path early on, so none of us waste any time working on something that isn't going to be able to be finished. All right, that's enough for now, and I wish you good luck with it. And if you have any questions, contact me at my email address or my phone. Bye.